What if the greatest source of your suffering isn't what has happened to you, but what remains hidden within you? Not the world, not your circumstances, not even other people. Carl Jung believed that much of human suffering begins in a place we rarely look, the parts of ourselves we've learned to ignore, suppress, or deny. And here's the unsettling part. The more successfully we hide those parts from ourselves, the more power they may gain over our lives. So why do intelligent people repeat the same mistakes? Why do we sabotage relationships we desperately want to keep? Why do fears return even after we've escaped the situations that created them? Jung thought he knew the answer. And if he was even partially right, understanding it could change the way you see yourself forever. Every person carries two lives. There's the one we show the world, and then there's the one unfolding quietly beneath the surface. The first is familiar. It's the personality we've carefully assembled over years of trying to belong. It's the version of ourselves that knows what to say, how to behave, and what should remain hidden. Jung called this the persona. It isn't fake. In fact, it's necessary. Without some form of social mask, navigating everyday life would be nearly impossible. We adjust our behavior depending on where we are. We speak differently with family than with strangers. We act differently at work than when we're alone. The persona helps us function. But problems begin when we mistake the mask for the whole person, because while one part of us is trying to fit in, another part waits in silence. Jung called this the shadow. The shadow isn't simply the dark side of human nature. It's everything we've rejected about ourselves. Sometimes those are uncomfortable traits like anger, envy, selfishness, or fear. But surprisingly, the shadow can also contain qualities we've been discouraged from expressing. Confidence, creativity, ambition, sensitivity, even joy. Anything that doesn't fit the identity we've built can end up pushed into the unconscious, and what disappears from awareness doesn't necessarily disappear from our lives. It simply finds other ways to express itself. This is where Jung's insight becomes deeply unsettling. He famously suggested that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. Think about recurring patterns. The friend who always ends up in controlling relationships, the employee who constantly feels overlooked, the perfectionist who never feels satisfied, regardless of achievement. At first, these situations seem unrelated. Different people, different places, different circumstances. Yet somehow, the emotional experience remains remarkably familiar. Jung wasn't suggesting that every hardship originates from within. Real suffering can arise from trauma, injustice, illness, and circumstances entirely outside our control. But he proposed that unconscious patterns often shape how we respond to life, and sometimes even the situations we repeatedly find ourselves in. Modern psychology offers related ideas. Research on cognitive schemas suggests that early experiences create mental frameworks that influence how we interpret the world. Confirmation bias can lead us to notice evidence supporting existing beliefs while overlooking contradictory information. Attachment theory explores how early relationships influence adult emotional patterns. These perspectives differ from Jung's theories in important ways, yet they all point toward a similar possibility. We don't simply experience reality, we interpret it. And interpretation quietly shapes experience. Imagine carrying an invisible map through life. You believe it's an accurate representation of the world. But unknown to you, entire regions are missing. Roads lead nowhere. Danger is marked where none exists. Opportunity has been erased. No matter how far you travel, you'll continue making decisions based on that incomplete map. The suffering doesn't come only from the world. It comes from navigating it with directions that no longer serve you. Jung believed dreams sometimes reveal pieces of this hidden landscape, not as literal predictions or supernatural messages, but as symbolic expressions of the unconscious. A recurring nightmare, a mysterious stranger, an abandoned house, a child lost in a forest. To Jung, these images invited reflection rather than certainty. They asked questions instead of providing answers. What part of yourself has been forgotten? What emotion keeps returning because it hasn't been understood? What truth keeps knocking because it has never been welcomed inside? Whether or not one accepts Jung's approach to dreams, the broader lesson remains compelling. The mind often communicates indirectly. Sometimes anxiety isn't merely about the future. Sometimes it's carrying unresolved experiences from the past. Sometimes anger protects a hidden vulnerability. Sometimes perfectionism disguises fear. Sometimes constant busyness keeps us from hearing something we'd rather avoid. The symptom isn't always the problem, sometimes it's the messenger. This idea echoes across many philosophical traditions. The Stoics encouraged examining our judgments rather than reacting automatically to emotion. Marcus Aurelius regularly questioned the stories his own mind produced. Eckhart Tolle speaks of observing thought instead of becoming completely identified with it. Alan Watts often explored the possibility that our constant struggle against ourselves creates unnecessary suffering. These thinkers approached the human mind from different directions, yet each suggested that awareness changes something fundamental. Not because awareness magically removes pain, but because unconscious suffering becomes conscious understanding. And those are not the same thing. Consider what happens when someone says, "I'm just an anxious person." It sounds like a simple description, but hidden within that sentence is an identity. The emotion has become the self. Jung would likely invite a different question. Who is the one noticing the anxiety? That small shift changes everything. Instead of becoming the emotion, you become curious about it. Curiosity opens doors that certainty keeps locked. This doesn't mean difficult emotions should be suppressed or dismissed. Quite the opposite. Jung believed that what we resist often grows stronger in the shadows. Imagine trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The harder you push it down, the greater the force with which it eventually rises. Many emotional patterns work similarly. Ignored grief returns as numbness. Unacknowledged fear becomes control. Hidden shame transforms into perfectionism. Buried resentment quietly leaks into everyday conversations. The goal isn't to eliminate these parts, it's to understand them. Because understanding changes our relationship with them. This process is what Jung called individuation, not becoming perfect, not becoming someone else, but gradually becoming whole. It is one of the most misunderstood aspects of his work. Wholeness doesn't mean removing every flaw, it means no longer pretending parts of yourself don't exist. Imagine walking through a house you've lived in for decades. Every room is familiar, except one. That door has always remained locked. You avoid it without remembering why. One day, curiosity overcomes fear. You open it. Inside, you don't find a monster waiting. You find forgotten pieces of yourself, dreams abandoned years ago, emotions never fully felt, strengths never allowed to emerge. The room was never your enemy, your fear of entering it was. Perhaps this is why genuine growth often feels uncomfortable. We're not merely learning something new, we're meeting someone we've been avoiding, ourselves. Of course, this process isn't always easy. Some experiences require the support of trusted friends, mentors, or mental health professionals. Self-exploration should never become self-isolation. The unconscious is fascinating, but it can also be complex. Reflection is most powerful when grounded in honesty, patience, and compassion. Because the goal isn't endless analysis, it's greater freedom. Freedom from automatic reactions, freedom from inherited assumptions, freedom from stories that no longer belong to us. Jung once remarked that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Notice he didn't say to invent someone new, he spoke of becoming. As though the person you're searching for has been quietly present all along, perhaps beneath the expectations, beneath the fears, beneath the carefully maintained masks. Suffering may not disappear simply because we understand it. Life will still bring loss, uncertainty, disappointment. No philosophy can erase those realities. But maybe unnecessary suffering begins to loosen its grip when we stop running from the parts of ourselves asking to be seen. Maybe healing is less about fixing what's broken and more about reconnecting with what has been forgotten. And if that's true, then the most important journey you will ever take may not lead somewhere new. It may lead inward. So the next time life repeats a familiar pattern, before asking, "Why does this always happen to me?" perhaps ask something even more difficult. What part of myself has been trying to get my attention all along?